It is 9 o'clock, and the first item on the agenda is the reordering, deletions, or emergency additions. Are there any? From hearing none, we will move on to approve the minutes from the January 16th meeting. May I have a motion to approve? So moved. Okay, I've got Peters. Second, Bill. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous? Okay. So next up is Christine and our financial presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Christine Noel-Ran. I'm a partner at Carr-Riggs & Ingram, and we do the town's external audit. So you all received a copy of the draft financial statements. So I'm just going to take you through some highlights of them. You do have a clean, unmodified opinion, so that is the opinion that you want. There was a new accounting standard this year. So there is a prior period adjustment, and that's due to implementing the new standard. So the new standard relates to what's referred to as SBITAs, so that's subscription-based information technology agreements. So every software that you have an agreement for more than a year, you now have to put the asset on the books and a liability. And it's calculated by taking the present value of the future payments. So it's treated very similar to leases are now. The reason you had a prior period adjustment was you previously had prepaids. So you had prepaid amounts for your subscriptions, and then those had to come off and be reductions of the liabilities. So you have about $68,000 of assets related to this. And so you had 15 agreements related for, body cameras, email filtering software, your hosting. It's a whole slew of things. And there's a lot that actually
Excuse me, do we belong to any sort of a consortium or group for software, government software?
I don't believe so.
Most of the government software is, we look for, we're not part of any specific consortiums. So we reach out, when I did our financial software, I reached out to other cities. We did actually, most of our big software is RFQ, or it's a piggyback off of a state contract or another local contract.
That's what I meant, off of a state contract.
We try to get a lot of the public safety software is, for the major ones, are piggybacks off of local cities. But like when we did specifically our financial software, we went out for RFQ and I tested a lot, demoed a lot of different softwares. So it really depends on the need for the software.
So we don't have necessarily any buying power. We do our own analysis, but we don't have any consortium that we would, like St. Lucie and Indian River and...
No, it's usually, and that's usually with most places because every city, town, government has their own unique needs, and a lot of the bigger ones, they tweak it specifically for their, like the county, they have unique needs versus the city, and so there's always, everyone has a different one, so there really isn't a lot of piggybacking or going to like the state. You can get discounts, but trying to go off and get tailor-made software, it's very hard to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's fine. And then so with all of this, you had there was $18,000 of prepaids that was removed from the governmental funds, and then that was taken as an offset of reduction to the liability. So there is a footnote related to that. I just wanted to point that out since that's new and different this year. When you look at the fund level, if you wanted to flip, it's page 21. So this is your statement of activities of the fund. And so while we're talking about the fund's SBITAs, there is a new line down towards the bottom. You'll see proceeds from SBITA obligations. So when you enter into a new agreement during the year, it comes in like proceeds on the fund level, and then all your payments against it are actually up in the debt service now as principal and interest, which seems a little odd because if you stop paying the subscription, they're going to cut you off. But it's treated similar to a lease, and even though you're not getting cash, the proceeds still go in there. It's strange, but that is how the standards are written. If we're staying on that same page for your general fund, if we compared this year to last year, your revenues were up $1 million. $591,000 of that was in your property taxes, and that was just because of the increased value of the property. You have $346,000 more of interest income. So interest rates were up and you had moved more money into the Florida Prime account. Your expenditures were up $912,000. $518,000 of that was in public safety, so there was additional pension contributions made into the pension plan, and then your salaries were also up due to raises. And then capital outlay was your other larger expenditure area, and that's due to the Pebble Bay Estates project. So there was $238,000 more in capital outlay this year.
Is the Pebble Bay the construction in progress, the 1.3 million?
The majority of that is, actually, if you are curious, a lot of that is, there's a note about commitments in the financial statements. I'm going to get to that page. That is going to be on page 73. You can see that we had $968,429 that we've spent on the Pebble Bay project. So,
I see, thank you.
I did.
And then in the next column is your ARPA fund. So you utilized $701,000 of the ARPA grant this year. It kept you under the $750,000 so that the town doesn't have to spend any money on a single audit. Yeah.
The whole ARPA thing is a little weird to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away until we just spend it?
You have until December of '24 to obligate it.
Oh,
so you had $591,000 left as of September to spend. So if you spend it all in this fiscal year or utilize it essentially, then you'll be using it before the time period's up. So Heather split it out so that across the 3 years, so you never hit that single audit threshold because it helps saves the town money.
And so you're going to spend the $591,000? Of course.
We have the public safety building renovations that's coming up this fiscal year, so we will be obligating the entire amount. Even if we don't finish spending it, it will be obligated before December 31st, 2024.
Okay, in the past, when we used that, there was, I can't remember, there was some other source of revenues that we used for the...
We use discretionary, it's the discretionary sales, it's the 1/2 cent.
The 1 cent or half
The
cent?
half-cent
Yeah, okay.
sales tax. We use those, but I'm going to use ARPA funds first, and then I will use the
And then you
remaining
can save the half cent for something else, or?
for other capital projects that we have going on.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, so there is a time frame, but it was several years that you had before it hit. You guys have been doing a great job in terms of actually spending it and having a plan for it, not every city in town. I'm having different conversations of make sure you spend it, please. Nobody wants to give it back to the treasury. Yeah. Yeah. And then your third column there is your other governmental, so that is your non-major funds. Your revenues were very consistent. It was less than $1,000 change. Your expenditures were up $160,000, so the Road and Bridge Fund paid for some of that Pebble Bay estate projects. So some of the funds came out of there. In terms of how much do you have in reserves and how are you doing, if you take your general fund expenditures and exclude your capital outlay, because those are one-time expenses, just in your unassigned, not even including your emergency funds, you have about 4 months worth of expenses. So, and typically you want to have at least 3, and you have, if you added the emergency funds to it, you'd be closer to 8 months. So you have plenty of funds set aside in your reserves.
Backing up to extra contribution to the pension fund. Was that required or just? Okay.
Because of the losses in the previous year, in the 2022 fiscal year, When the actuarial valuation came up, we had to basically double our contribution. It was required by state statute. We have to meet that. So it wasn't one that the council said, oh, let's put more money in there. No, this was a required contribution. So,
Okay. What caused the shortfall?
the 2022, all the investment losses from the previous fiscal year, the market. So, because we don't smooth out, so when the market has a bad year, the next year, we're going to be paying more in our contribution rates.
And did I'll say the contributors, the individuals, they hit the max, which is what, 9% or something?
9%. They went from five or like somewhere between 5 and 6% all the way back up to 9%, which is the maximum they have to contribute.
Right, okay. And does any of this loss have to do with the way that the pension committee allocates?
We all saw a big loss last year. It was just the market as it is. Even our general employee pension plan saw a loss. And
I saw it went down, yeah.
Yeah, and so did our the OPEB fund. They all went down in 2022. We saw it turn around in 2023, but because of how the contributions and how the valuations are done, you don't see that gain until the following year. So this year, our contribution went from where it was down almost half again. So it went from like, I don't remember what our contribution rate was.
So this is, if you look at page 79.
Yep, 49.
That has your general employees, and so you went from a $40,000 contribution to an $85,000 contribution.
Yep.
And then 81, page 81 is the police and fire, and you went from 182,000 required to 351,000.
And this year, we're paying a 17% contribution from the 22%. So as we get the interest back, we're going to pay less back into the plan.
Excuse me, who chooses to smooth or not smooth?
The pension committee. So this was decided for the general employees 10 years ago, and the council is the general employee pension trustees. They decided to go to the market rate, and council at that time urged the pension board for the police to do the exact same thing, and they followed through on that, and it's still been the council's recommendation to stay at market and not to smooth in order to be transparent where we are. They don't want to hide anything. That's how they kind of phrased it. So that was the town council's recommendation to the pension board, but the pension board makes that decision.
So a few years ago, we were 100% funded on everything. And now, at least on the public employees, we're under, 96% or something like that. But, so I would expect that by the end of this year, we'd probably be back to 100%.
As close, we will be close to we will be in the higher 90s. I don't remember what our current, we were at 96 at 9/30/23. So we should be getting closer. It'll probably be 98% funded next year. So we make it up. We just, when we have a bad year, it swings our contribution rate.
In 2021, police and fire was 115% funded, and then in 2022, it dropped to 91% because of the market. So,
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, and that was the next thing I was going to talk about, actually. So your police and fire, both of those and the general contributions went up. You did not make any contributions into your OPEB plan. So at the end, again, we're 96% funded police and fire, 113% funded for your general, and then your OPEB was at 138% funded. In terms of footnotes, we already mentioned there's the prior period adjustment because of the subscription, and then there's additional footnotes. So the subscription assets are included in the fixed asset footnote now as a separate line on page 42, and now you have subscription liabilities on page 43 if you're looking for those.
So the net effect is GASB 96 created a whole lot more work.
Yes, yes. It was more work, I think, than the capital leases were, just from the standpoint of most of the time you get an invoice and you pay it, and now you had to figure out, what is the life? Do I have an agreement for this? What is my inventory of all my software? It was a lot more work, I think, than leases were, and you're not seeing like FASB and the financial markets follow this at all. So this is a fun government-only standard. From a finding standpoint, we did not have any findings or areas of improvement. Heather is fantastic. We talked a lot about GASB 96 and how to implement it while you were going through it up front. So she's always very cognizant of making sure we're on the same page with any new standards. Very lucky to have her. I would say most towns that have your size do not have someone with her accounting background. Does anyone have any questions on the statements? If not, I was going to go to the other paper I've just passed out.
Well, I think the only comment is that we got a clean opinion and that and there were no audit adjustments.
No.
So between those two, it's like, oh yeah, we're good.
Yeah. I passed out this financial, it should be in front of you on the desk, financial indicator list. So this is a template from the Florida Auditor General, and so we have to fill this out to make sure that you're not on the brink of bankruptcy. You are nowhere near that. So the overall rating at the top, inconclusive, that just means you're doing fine. 90% of the time, everybody shows up as inconclusive because a lot of the trends and benchmarks work against each other. So I just want to make sure it's clear. You do have some that show up as unfavorable, but it's because you as a town don't generally go out to debt for items. So you've saved up the money and then you're spending it on your capital items. So all of the ones that have the unassigned fund balance, that's decreasing because now you've spent money on things like Old Winter Beach Road, your Pebble Bay Estates, the public safety building. So now you're spending some of that money that you had built up before. So from 2019 to 23, it's a decline. But as we mentioned before, you still have, including those emergency funds, 8 months worth of your expenditures. So you are fine in terms of your reserves. You took a more fiscally conservative approach and you're not getting debt and you saved the money up and then you used it. So there's nothing wrong with that, but trend-wise, it'll just show up as unfavorable because it's gone down. The other thing that tripped a couple unfavorables was just your accounts payable in 2019 just happened to be really low because of timing of just where it was. So when you compared some of the current liabilities to other items, to like cash and investments, 2019 looks better because your accounts payable just happened to be low that year compared to the other years. But your cash and investments were very consistent. If you looked at 2019 to 2023, it was 7.7 million compared to 7.9 million. It was just your accounts payable 2020 through 23, very similar. 2019 was just small. So when it goes from year 1 to year 5, it looks like a big decline. But nothing to be concerned or alarmed about. I know we've talked about this before, but you do have, if you're looking in the back for like the OPEB and the pension, you are the only one in the benchmarks that is funding your OPEB, so that shows up as inconclusive because you're against yourself. You are the benchmark. Yeah. And what your residents will probably like is you are very favorable in terms of your millage rate. So you're on the lower end compared to other towns your size.
So just glancing at this, there's obviously an awful lot of unfavorables.
Yeah,
And-
so like two and 3, those are because of the spending of the fund balance. And then 4, there's a 4GF and the 4G, that's government-wide and general fund versus the other funds. Again, that was the 2019 just happened to be low in accounts payable. So next year, you won't have that low year, so then your trends will probably flip the other way. Yeah.
So it would seem then that this whole exercise is a little bit misleading.
You have to like really look at it and what the reasons are why. I've only ever had one city that you went through this and you're like, oh, you're not doing well, and it was because they spent like all of their reserves on like a new public safety building and didn't pay close attention to it. It's like, you know, that how many months do you have in expenditures? Like they didn't have 2 months anymore. So yeah, like I have to do this because the state wants it, but you know.
Okay, and this is a state mandated
This is a state mandated
exercise?
thing, yes. Yeah.
And do you know what I'll say, generated this? Or what was somebody's bankruptcy or something that?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was even in Florida, because.
Well, I know California had several.
Yeah, this form's been
Stockton
around
being one
for
of them.
at least 15 years. Yeah, longer than that, so, yeah. So they just want to make sure no one's tripping it. And so state came up with this as a way just to look at it. Are there indicators? Because they want to step in and help the municipality before they hit that bankruptcy. So that's where it came from, yeah.
Are there any metrics available to other towns similar to ours for comparison purposes?
So the benchmark column, those are tailored to, so like that year 5 bench, that number, that comes off of towns or really small cities that are similar in size. So like they have similar populations, they only have governmental funds, not enterprise, so you don't have a small fund in there that does water, sewer or something. And it's on the state's website. You can pull down and look, you know, here's the other ones and here's what they have. So when you look at the benchmark, that's you compared to other ones similar to you.
And does the state provide, I'll say, that comparison data?
Yes, so they
So like you put in your town budget size or number of residents or something? And
yeah, so they pull it all from the annual financial reports. Like Heather every year has to upload that, and then they aggregate it all together
and then they send it back to, or they generate the benchmarks based upon?
on that. So then they pull the data out for those, and then they basically list what it is for all those similar towns, and then like here's the average for those, and then that's the benchmark.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there anything that you want else that you want to call our attention to, something that we may be a potential concern or?
No, I mean, you have no new accounting standards you have to do for 24, so you get a year off. And then in 25, there'll be a change to compensated absences.
To what?
Compensated absences.
Oh.
So instead of just what you will pay out in the future, you have to do an estimate too of how much people will use. So the biggest change would be like your sick time. So if you don't pay sick time out upon termination, but you know people use their sick time, you have to estimate how much you think they're going to use and then book that as a liability. We're doing lots of guesses, yeah.
Okay, well, anybody else have any questions? With that, I would ask for a motion to accept and recommend to the council that they too accept the results of the audit. So moved. Bob? Okay, Bill? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, very good. Thanks very much, Christine. All right, so we got a budget meeting in May, and we're going to be able to have at least some real basic information that we can go over.
I just telling Jim this morning, I am doing my best to get it. It's May, Janice?
I believe it's May 21st.
May 21st at 10 a.m. or is it 9 a.m.?
I think it's 9 a.m.
Okay. So I will have something to you 1 week prior to that so that you'll have time to review and ask questions of me, or that we have time. If I can get it to you sooner, I will, but the soonest I think
Sure.
will be 1 week prior to that.
Well, I think, at least from my perspective, anything we can have that we can discuss before everyone flees the scene is appreciated.
All right.
And then when you get the real numbers, which will be end of June,
July 1st.
July 1st, okay.
I'll get the numbers on July 1st, and the council will have a budget workshop at the July meeting. So I will get it, when I get that wrapped up, it should pretty much be done. That should just be a plug, and then finish all the different numbers at that point. I will send a copy to each of the finance, well, I'll have Janice send a copy to the finance committee members so you can produce any more comments if you would like, and we can provide that to council.
Okay, very good.
All right,
Thanks, Heather.
of course.
Okay, guys, so you guys will be here for May 21?
What about
Good.
May 21? Yeah,
I beg your pardon?
May 21.
Yep, okay. So we're confirming that, I guess. And since there's nobody in the audience, I'll call the meeting adjourned. Thanks very much.